That's the little robot lady that says we're recording. So, what's up today? I am talking with my buddy. Well, I always call you Avi. I don't know if you wanted to choose your full name or not, but Avi, a paramedic I've worked with for a while, and he had a really cool topic. We were talking about it a little bit on social media. Then um, I think it'd be a good thing for him to expand upon in conversation form. So I want to have him on to talk about some ways that people in EMS can try to find that work-life balance. We were just catching up a little bit before we hit record, and I was kind of talking about how it's kind of what I'm doing now. My unceremonious departure from the emergency room I was working at, I've been doing some contract work and kind of trying to take control of my schedule a little more and work. I'm still working for another company, but I'm choosing when I work with the contract stuff. I'm choosing to like last week I worked a lot. That's why I didn't do an episode earlier, but this week I've got a lot of it off, and it's time for me to have conversations like this, to do some big game streaming, do some writing. I built a Lego set. First time I've done that in years. So like that was cathartic. It was really nice. So I'm finding that balance, but it's something that's really challenging for me to do when I was working EMS. So I think talking about ways that people who are working with that demanding schedule and that demanding career can find some ways to decompress, because God knows we definitely needed it.
Indeed.
So what's up, man? You want to introduce yourself a little bit? And I'm excited to talk about this.
Yeah, sounds good. My name's Avi. I've been in EMS in Central Florida now for a good 12 to 13 years. Most of that time has been spent around as a medic. I've spent time in various counties throughout Central Florida, and the one thing that has always come to my attention is, number one, being on the spectrum, that I've had to find a way to communicate with people from fire departments and work my way through admin. And when you think divergently, that can get difficult for them. And also what I've noticed is, over the years, between the mandatory and trying to pay bills, a lot of us end up suffering that burnout, and we watch these years and years of experience just go by the wayside. And so the idea that we have experienced providers leaving, and here I am that I've had to restructure my own life, eventually becoming even a marathoner to make sure that I can find that work-life balance for myself. And I guess that's where we started with that conversation, is trying to make things better for people like us so they can have fruitful careers. And not only that, but if they need to move on, not be ashamed of doing that, because they can go ahead and have a better life and find that balance for themselves.
Yeah, and there's so much you talked about that I want to touch on too, that I want to get to, but especially those last things you said, like when you say career, because I've said for so long, I'm not the first one to come up with this. I think someone else told me this, but from early in my career, I was told, and learned to be true later on, that like EMS is not necessarily a career. It's more of a job. It's more of something, because like I don't know. Like I spent 2011 is when I got hired by Metro out in Sumter as an EMT, brand new, fresh out of school, ink still wet on my certs. How to set up a life pack before, but here I am on a truck at the midnight rollout, just thrown on the truck. Oh yeah, you'll be fine. Sure. And I slept the entire night. Didn't tell me anything. I was terrified the entire time I was going to get a call. But anyway, but I only know, out of like that decade or so I've been part of the community, I only know maybe 2 or 3 people that have retired for 20 years in EMS who weren't working admin, who were actually on the truck doing transport EMS. And I just, so many people I know, they either they cross over into nursing, they bridge over and get their RN because it's less hours and far more pay, or they phase out of healthcare completely. And almost everyone I know in EMS has a side gig.
Yeah.
So that's just something. So I would love to see, like, everyone talks about different ways that you can make EMS more of a career versus a job. Like there's that factor too. Like there's the point of that is there's high turnover rate. It's not something people stick with for a long time. And it's a combination of things. Like, the job itself, everything goes right when you have good support, good infrastructure, great admin. Like the job itself is hard, but then you pile on top of that, you're scrambling for supplies, trying to borrow stuff from hospitals so you can't start IVs anymore because you're out of stock. When you're working 36 hours straight with no choice, because otherwise you get written up because mandatory overtime. Like you're 15 reports down, and then you're writing a report for someone that stubbed his toe, and you still got the pediatric, sudden infant death syndrome that you got to write up for. Not to mention, not only do you have to document it, then you have to actually cope with it when you do finally get off work and try to fit seeing your family, getting your chores done, taking care of household stuff within that 36 hours, and find some time to sleep. Like you're not a human anymore after a while.
Yeah, and that's why that order of operations is so important, that you can't help anybody until you help yourself. And that is sadly the first rule that, you know, I had to learn the hard way over time. And you talk about that in mandatory for 36 hours. A lot of those guys that are working those fire rescues, they're working a whole 24-hour mandatory. And I did that when I was with Marion County not too long ago, and I was burnt out. I was straight up, and that's even with, you know, having ways to deal with, you know, having physical outlets, having a supportive family. I was still burnt out working those 48s every 3 shifts or so.
Right. Yeah. Well, it gets to a point where, like, if every now and then you need some emergency coverage, okay, that's fine. You know, I understand if someone got sick or car accident, things happen. That's what you have this in place for. But when it's becoming a habit where you're working a couple of mandatories every month, or you're working 36 on, 36 off, basically, it's not sustainable for a single person with no other responsibilities. Like, if that's the only thing you did was eat, sleep, EMS, or fire, that's it. Even that's not sustainable for a healthy, efficient provider. But then you also have the other factors in too, where you have your family or everything else. You can't take care of that stuff. So like the burnout, I mean, like anyone's going to experience that burnout too. So and it's just it's so rampant in so many places.
And not to get too far ahead, but when I take a look at all these when I take a look at the fact that the mandatory is increasing everywhere, and the fact that people are having trouble finding that balance, no matter if the pay is getting a little bit better, but because they don't have that balance and because they're burning out, nobody thinks about the impact, about the social services impact that providers go through. The first step with that is simple things like childcare, or simple things like finding someone to walk the dog. If you take somebody's life over for an additional 12 hours to 24 hours, how are they expected to get how are they expected to take care of themselves? And that's something that I'm working towards, eventually hoping to get an MSW, a Master's in Social Work, so that we can create those networks to actually get people the help that they need. Because no union's going to help you walk your dog. No union's going to help you pick up the kids from school. It requires a network, it requires a family, and sometimes we have to be our own family to take care of people.
It takes a community. Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's so hard for us to put ourselves first so often too. Because I mean, it's literally a job where sometimes you may be called to sacrifice yourself for a complete stranger. You're actually in dangerous situations, and you know we don't know who's calling. We don't care who's calling. We have someone called. Okay, here we go. Yes, but then for us to like try to take a step back and be like, well, wait, I'm not doing well right now. I need to stop and take a break myself. Like the hardest thing I ever did, like I wrote about this a lot when I first left EMS, but that was the hardest thing I ever did as a paramedic, was deciding to step away. It was an agonizing thing. And like I reached out to like so many people that I knew and trusted. Even like I was talking to like chaplains of the fire department I had just been hired with. I was agonizing over getting ready to leave for mental health reasons. It was rough. But one thing that I will say I was very, very happy and impressed by was the amount of support I had when I did leave. I thought that I was going to be burning bridges. People were going to think, oh, this puss can't handle it. And I of course, you know, I've got a very negative bias towards myself already, but like these are things like that community doesn't necessarily come off as the most understanding sometimes. Mm-hmm. And I mean, there's different reasons for that as well. But at the end of the day, I got a reaction that's far different than I expected. I think a lot of people, especially the people that have been, you know, the chief there was amazing, and some of the them that have been in there for a while, and then lieutenants, they are all understood, like we've seen that kind of burnout, we understand how it goes, like you got to take care of yourself. And like even to the point where the chief made sure he put me on the eligible for rehire list if I ever decided I wanted to come back, and said I'd have a home. And I'm like, that was the opposite of the reaction I expected. Mm-hmm. And then when the outpouring I got when I wrote about it publicly, of people saying like, oh yeah, me too, I'm fried, blah blah blah, I'm realizing it was much more it wasn't a personal battle I was fighting at that point. It was a pandemic amongst all of us that we all had to start fighting together.
Yeah, it is quite literally it's quite literally something that we all deal with together, and that no one's immune from it within the industry. And the fact of the matter is that, you know, you get the support, but when did you receive the support? You received the support after you made the decision that you need to leave. My issue is how do we get people to support before they leave?
Right.
How do we relieve that strain from folks? Because the idea that you have an admin that's going to come to you and put you on a rehire list is nice, but where is that admin to prevent that mandatory? I don't know if you experienced this when working for Lake, and I'll do my best to leave names out of it, but we sometimes saw supervisors on trucks, but we never saw anyone from admin on a truck. Straight up.
Yep, I absolutely experienced that, and then the exact same names would come up if you and I were to talk off the air. But yeah, but that's something like when you're working a lot of mandatory overtime, you really notice what your leadership's doing too. When you see them out there lifting stretchers right next to you, showing up on these scenes, or even running around making sure everyone's stocked up, ready yourself. But especially when you see a supervisor on an ambulance transporting, that's when you know, like, okay, A, okay, things are rough if you see them there, but B, that one's got your back. But where are the rest? Where are the ones who are giving you the call saying you can't go home? Or are the ones that are writing you up when you do take that day off? You say, I respectfully decline, I'm going home.
Yeah.
But when they're writing you up, are they the ones helping on a truck when you're not there? Usually not.
Exactly. They're just going to put that truck out of service 9 times out of 10.
Right. And then it gets to the point where your own agency, your own people that you would turn to for help, to lead certain scenes, but they're the ones who are punishing you for trying to take care of yourself, but then also they're not taking the responsibility. They're demanding more of you, but doing nothing more themselves. It creates this mistrust in your own agency. And then I mean, if you were salty before, now we're reaching dead sea levels when you see that kind of stuff happening.
Oh, definitely. But worse than that, you're having somebody who's already diminished having to take care of themselves because they don't have that community and they don't have that support. And I don't know if you've experienced in this past, but if you take that sick day and then you're just moving somebody else on the mandatory list if you decline that mandatory. So then you have that added social pressure that just combines to, your feeling of self-worth and your feeling of balance and your feeling of whether or not you're married to the job or if you're married to your wife. Like, that's a serious question.
And that's something else that's a very good point too, is that camaraderie that you have with your other quote unquote frontline workers, especially in the first responder community. I mean, especially if you're working a 24-hour shift, you spend a third of your life with these people. And not only is it the amount of time you're spending with them, but like, there's the ones that are next to you pulling people out of mangled cars. These are the ones pulling people out of fires, handing them off to you. Like, you're the ones, like, usually you're working out together. If you have time. But like, these are the people that you form very, very strong bonds with. And then you realize if you need to step out and take care of yourself, it feels like you're betraying them because now they have to pick up more of what you consider your slack, or at least of the opening your absence causes. But we take that blame on ourselves. It happens in the ER too. I saw a ton of the ER when I was working there. And I think in a lot of situations that I don't like to assume anyone's predatory intentionally, but it's a pattern often enough. I think it's worth acknowledging that a lot of different workplaces have this kind of camaraderie and this kind of loyalty where basically what's going to happen when people are taken out of that. That there's going to be a desire to make it work no matter what because people are so loyal to each other. So if you were in the place and they make cuts, you would know they could probably pull it together, at least try to. But then that's going to contribute to the faster burnout that we see happening in multiple healthcare fields in multiple nations now.
I don't know if you know this story, but I'd like to tell you a story regarding the sick time and vacation time.
Yeah, go for it.
I was in an agency where we were so busy and we were getting mandatored so much that the idea of even taking your vacation just meant that you'd be mandatoring your friends. Straight up that simple. Oh, my light went off there. Can
no worries. Okay? Yeah, I can still see it fine. It's all good.
Okay, I won't worry about the light then. But anyhow, so we were so far behind as far as staffing went that I went ahead and took my long days, my three day that week, and I took all those shifts off, but I worked 48s on the other 4 days. So the best way that I could even use my vacation time was to get paid for every hour of that week. So
it's just
it's time and then get the overtime and then work the other days so I wasn't being a shit to the other crews. Now here's the funny part about with this. They made a rule after that you couldn't do that anymore.
Of course they did.
So of course. You couldn't even help your brothers.
There are and this isn't just like one agency we've had a bad experience with. Like I've worked for, like we've both worked for multiple agencies across the state, some of them the same ones, like how we first met, and some of them other ones. We've worked for local government, county government, city government, private company. It's and there's just, I don't know. I don't know if it's just something that happens somewhere when you're getting a business degree, you turn into a heartless monster, but it just seems like there's just so many policies that not only shoot the agencies in the foot, but are just seem like they're actively trying to burn out their employees.
There is a straight up that there is a disconnect, and the disconnect comes because the fact that admin has forgotten what it's like to be in the field. So the best thing to do is, if the first person to get mandatory has to be the person at the top. If they hold a patch, they better get ready to be on the truck, because that's the only way you're going to fix it. That's the only way you're going to actually have the correct culture, is to start with the idea that I do it too, and I need the help too in the services. Because we shouldn't be focused. We are always going to focus on the patient, but when our shift is over, the expectation is that we should be going home. And so if that expectation can't be met, it has to hit everybody the same. You can't be safe because you're a lieutenant. You can't be safe because you're a commanding officer. You can't even be safe because you're the new guy. Everybody has to pull that weight, and everybody has to have the same access to the same services to make sure that they are supported.
Right. And if you're a good leader in one of those roles in the first place, and you came up through the ranks, so to speak, working the trucks, doing the grunt work, quote unquote, like if you want to be a good leader and make sure you can still relate to your people and know what the job's like, you have to be on a truck. You shouldn't want to consider yourself safe from doing the job that you're leading others through doing. You should be in the very front. When there's disaster, hurricanes coming in, you're doing disaster preparedness, like you should be the first one taking that shift, jumping in that barricade, doing that work. You should be the ones doing that hard work, leading from the front. That way, you're going to earn the respect of the people around you. And if they do need to sacrifice now and then for a short like a short staffing day or something that happens like that, they're going to step up for you more often. But B, it's also going to keep you as a fresh, humble, knowledgeable leader, because you know the conditions your people are in. And then that's where the big disconnect is. You're absolutely right. It's people that haven't worked the job in so long, they either forget or don't know what the current conditions are. I think anyone, you're absolutely right. If you're still wearing if you're wearing those fancy Class A uniforms to work every day with that big blue paramedic patch, if you're a Florida medic, you better be using it. Otherwise, what's the point? It's not decoration.
All I'm asking is for 2 days a month you get on a truck.
I think that's more than fair.
Yeah.
More than fair. Even a 12-hour shift. Yeah. I prefer you do a full 24, so you really get the good. But
I'll be honest with you, Justin. Those days are even behind me. The idea of getting hit for 48, my 42-year-old body says I'd rather run a marathon than do that.
Bro, I would too. I'm a decade younger, and I'd rather do that too. I don't think any EMS agency should run 24-hour shifts unless you're running less than 5 calls a shift, or a significantly lower number where people actually can get enough rest on shift where they can be safe and operate safely. Because once you've been away for 15 to 18 hours, you start having cognitive decline. I was reading some of the studies they use to implement the rules for truck drivers, who have very, very strict rules, I believe regulated by the National Highway Traffic and Safety Administration. State Administration, EMS is under, right?
That's exactly what I was going to say. The DOT rules for them, but not for us when we're carrying human cargo.
Right. And we're calculating. I forget if I don't sleep for one night, like I can barely find my keys the next morning. You think I'm going to accurately be able to dose out like narcotics for infants, or like for do pediatric dosages or do complex med math? Like I'm not going to be able to fucking figure out a drip rate for dopamine when I'm barely able to find out where my shears are.
And here's the best part. Now it's not even dopamine. Now they're putting norepi on trucks as a standard. You got right now in my head, I have the dosing for hydrozoline. I have the dosing for metoprolol, labetalol. When before, for the most part, we had labetalol.
Yeah, I've never carried anywhere it had metoprolol. I've given labetalol one time.
Yeah.
And then that whole career, but it goes back to exactly what we were both saying too. Is like it's just unsafe. Like paramedics and EMS, we should be able to. Like the scope should keep increasing. Our scope of practice, there's so much we can do, and not only our scope to do and route the transport, but there's a lot of stuff we can treat and release. We start expanding these scopes, but you're going to have competent, rested, healthy providers to do that safely. As the stakes keep getting raised, you're going to have to be able to attract and keep qualified personnel. The retention is a major problem, because experience, like you can teach us so much, but like until I've actually, every time I went to a cardiac arrest or a code during school, it was the most terrifying thing ever. Like my butt was Pucker Carlson. It's just always horrifying, right? Then it gets to the point after you've actually run a few and you've done a few of these, like, okay, I would never say it's routine, but it becomes something you've done enough that the experience pays off in ways that are significant. If you can't maintain staff, then experience just gets pissed away.
Indeed. I think that you experienced that effect where we were with an organization that lost over 300 years of paramedic experience in a month.
There was a mass exodus from that last agency.
Yeah, and that was just to go ahead, for the most part, to save money because they figured they could do it cheaper.
Right.
And karma came around and bit them square in the ass when the pandemic happened.
Yep. And when you start losing all of that experience, you start having, and it's a disservice to the new people coming up too, because like we both of us coming up, we're lucky. We both had partners, or we had a chance to work with people who, like my first partner at the first agency we were at, when I was working with Sue, I would not have been half the medic I was. If I was ever any kind of good kind of medic, it was from having a mentor like her to work with already like starting off from square one with a fountain of knowledge, being able to have that. But like most places, you're lucky you find someone that's got 3 years experience in some of these places.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I was blessed because one of my first partners, he had little experience, but he was good at building rapport with people. And so by watching everything by making friends with him while he made friends with others, that provided me the comfort to be able to operate not only as a functional EMT, but as like a damn good medic, because everybody knew that I was going to step back and I was going to see everything.
Yeah.
Everybody got used to me by getting used to him.
And that's something else I want to touch on too. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. You can go ahead and finish that. You mentioned earlier on, we've been ranting about the frustrations with stuff, but so some of the ways you've mentioned being on the spectrum and finding different ways for you to cope. What are some of the differences that you've noticed over your career between the way someone that's, say, I hate this phrasing, but it really is the best word I can figure out to say someone that's more neurotypical than someone like yourself who's on the spectrum? What are some differences you've noticed and some ways that you've been able to cope with that? If this meeting ends, we'll just start a new one. Don't worry about that notification. Okay.
Well, but I would like the best way to put it is it's almost the reverse of what you would expect. And that is you would expect people that would be more, people would be more understanding and temper their approach to me. But in reality, the way it's always been is I have to temper my approach to others. So it's almost like a delicate dance because I'm never leading the dance.
Right.
I'm always letting them make the first step. And I'm trying to figure out, which is not my strong suit, what they expect from me in the situation.
That's gotta be tough to figure out. So I mean, even I have difficulty picking up social cues.
Mm-hmm. So it takes a while for me to come into a rhythm with someone, but I'm sure the crews that get used to working with me, they love the way that I handle my stuff because they know everything's going to get done. And once they enter my world, then I can lead the dance.
That makes sense.
Until we go through that adjustment period.
Yeah, I think in some cases too, they're not quite sure which world, or even that there is a conjunction of spheres, so to speak, happening when they encounter you. But I mean, I think that makes complete sense. Like once you start building rapport with somebody, they start learning the way you tick or the way you operate. And especially the way you operate is huge with respect and camaraderie in this field, because there's plenty of people that have been like, oh yeah, you're a cool person, don't touch me if I'm ever hurt. There's other people that I'm like, I would never hang out with them, but if I'm hurt, I hope they're the first one to show up. So like there is really a lot of that. But once you've got some integrity and you've got some wits about you, or you can get yourself through like a decent quote unquote call, or like a legit emergency call, with without soiling yourself, something like that, or making it worse, then okay, cool, you're good. You know, you want to get there one. There's usually that one call. Like whenever you go to like a new firehouse, I work in EMS. Usually we're stationed with fire departments, and then so usually we want like it's kind of like a we're staying in their house, or we're all going to be cool. How's it going to go? Step family kind of situation. So up until you run like that first like serious call, you're always like, how's it going to go? Then usually once you run that first call, like, okay, everyone's cool, buddy, buddy. After that.
Yeah, and you know, we all experience that. It's just also, in my case, it's getting people used to mannerisms and things of that nature, because that's another thing, is I have found out that with with the EMS crews themselves, we kind of speak the same language always, but with the fire crews, there's more of a hugging kind of, you know, that there's more of an essential family structure, which we all fit into.
Right. There's a lot of times EMS, well, we see it all the time. EMS is kind of the redheaded stepchild of the first responder community, or like emergency services. And no, because we're newest on the scene. Everyone else has been here for a while. Fire and police have been here for a hot minute. Pun not intended at that time, actually. But yeah, so it's newer. It's a weird, it hasn't always been a great integration either, because I know a lot of firefighters that don't want to be medics, but to promote, you got to be a medic. So it's been almost kind of a forced conjunction that a lot of people aren't always really happy with, and a lot of places isn't really fitting. So like we said, with call volumes increasing and staffing going down, having a fire department running EMS calls too, it's not as safe for the people, or especially for the staff running the calls.
Yeah, that's an extremely valid point, in that, you know, you want caring providers who want to be there. And if you have somebody who got into firefighting to fight fires, and he's dealing with the fact that, you know, 85 to 90% of his job is all medical, that's something that needs to be addressed too.
Yeah, and I'm there's always that joke whenever when I was in, it's always the joke of like, oh, the hose dragon firefighters, oh yeah, they're beating their chest, blah blah blah. But like when I honestly, I did not give even just like your basic fire standards level firefighter enough credit for, like, it was tough intellectually too. Like I knew it would be tough physically when I went through fire school, but man, it was there. The pacing was really tough. And then if you really start getting some of the building construction stuff, do pump ops, like it's like there's a lot more to it. And so my point there being is like, a firefighter doesn't need to be anything else. There's plenty there to keep a firefighter busy, especially if you're breaking in technical rescue stuff, ropes, confined space, trench ops, like all there's so much there. You don't necessarily, like, if you're trying to impact if you try to be a jack of all trades, you're going to be a master of none. So I think there needs to be a conversation moving forward with our careers, like, okay, well, should fire and EMS split in some places, and should there be more of a delineation of responsibilities to these more specialized team members working as a whole unit together, instead of everyone trying to be able to do everything but not doing any of it well?
Well, it's kind of like the idea where, you know, it's kind of fun to have a Leatherman, but sometimes you really just need a screwdriver.
Right. Yeah, that's a very good analogy. I've been that guy so many times. I got this multi-tool of 15 things. I can't find the one thing I fit when a knife will fix it or something, you know?
Yeah. And it says, and you know, and just like in EMS, there's many tracks opening up, whether it's community care, paramedicine, whether it's, you know, whether it's the SWAT medic, because that's going to be continue to become an issue. And we think that we have PTSD issues now. Unless we get a hang of that, we're going to have a bunch of SWAT medics that have some serious PTSD.
Right. Yeah, we're opening whole new avenues of mental issues.
We're at a fun crossroads within EMS, because we can start specializing. We can start specializing and give people tracks to go, so they're not just thinking about, I'm always going to be a street medic, but that they are transferring into something other than becoming an RN, or considering PA school, or considering going to admin.
I think that's something that'd be really cool too, because that's not something that for a time, I felt trapped. I'm like I haven't gone to school for anything but these technical certificates that make me a paramedic, and that's it. I don't have a degree. I don't have this or that. Like my option, like I'm just going to be a street medic for 20 years and hope I can retire without too many back problems. Yeah. You know, even not even make it that far, you know, statistically speaking. So it's been very, very nice seeing so many more things. Like I think as people are recognizing how much paramedics can do, because like how many times did you start your career? People didn't realize paramedics could do that. They thought we were just a ride to the hospital. A lot of people still do. But I started, you start to get chest pain, you show up, you start whipping out your EKG, and you're like, wait, what? They're like, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, I want to look at your heart. They're like, you can do that?
Mhm.
So you do it pretty damn well.
Well,
But
you have a lot of the fun skills that we learn when we start working in the ER, because we were used to just splinting things with a triangular bandage and calling it a day.
right.
All of a sudden now I can play with orthoglass and make me a damn good sugar tongue and everything else. And
Yeah, you start learning it. Yeah.
the fact that those kind of things we can't handle in the field, I think that eventually, hopefully one day we'll get to the point where just like, yep, that's deformed. Here's your splint. Go make an appointment with ortho.
Right. Or even get to the point where we can suture up small lacks in the field. I know medics that learn to suture in hospitals, and then they do it fine, and so that's, here's, all right, cool. Here is your sutures, go to the ER, get them pulled out in a couple of days, and then, and here's a script to, and you call it a script for some antibiotics or something, or like here's some Neosporin, whatever, there's significant amount that EMS could do and treat and release in the field that would drastically decrease the overwhelm, the overcrowding at hospitals and ERs, and just the overwhelming of the EMS in general too. It would benefit everyone.
It would benefit everybody, and it takes stress off the system, and it gives us avenues in which to progress in our careers.
Yep. Instead of the patient getting an ER bill and transport bill for a couple sutures, they just get billed for the sutures and a little bit of the medic's time.
Yeah, and everybody's better off for it. And you have, because this is another thing as far as that life balance, but also feeling appreciated at work and feeling that you're making the progress.
Mm.
So giving us the chance to help in different ways for it's our patient from beginning to end. And that for lack of a better term, the continuity of care started with us and ended with us on that contact. I know that as a paramedic, that's something that would give me a lot of pride.
Oh, 100%. And so the last minute for this meeting ends, and I'll stop this one. I'll send you an invite for a brand new one in a second when it cuts off. But yeah, that continuity of care, that being able to see it through. Because I read something about burnout is people basically feel burnt out when they feel like what they do doesn't matter. And like when most of us like by thinking back, there's nothing really we can, the paramedics just show up, fix, and walk away like badasses. The only thing I can think of is like hypoglycemic emergencies. Show up, here's some sugar, bam, boom, cool, you're good. Here's a sandwich, everything cool. Don't drive anywhere. See you in 3 days when it happens again. But there's so much we could treat and release though. But let me pause myself right there before this runs out, and then I'll send you an invite in a minute. Okay, bud?
All right, sounds good.
All right. Cool. And we're back. But I totally forgot the last point I was making when I cut off there too.
Yeah. Well, I know we were talking about the idea of being able to go ahead and treat a patient on scene from beginning to end, and go ahead and not just take a refusal, but actually end a patient contact on scene.
Right. And the last thing I want to get to that point was I would love for there's so much of like the legal system that dictates medicine.
Yeah.
All the way up, like from what we can and can't do on the street to what doctors are able to prescribe to people. There's a lot of stuff that there even like archaic practices, like using long backboards for full C-spine immobilization. There has been so much research that has showed putting a human being's bent, curved spine onto a flat board for a prolonged amount of times, not only does not necessarily protect them from further damage, which was the intent of doing it before, it causes damage. Because I guarantee you, every patient you're putting on a backboard, they didn't have back pain when you put them on it. 5 minutes later, you reassess them, they have back pain because their backs aren't flat. But that's the standard of care. That's the legal precedent. So we have agencies using it 20 years after studies that are being shown that it's detrimental to patients. Like if backboarding was a drug, it would not be FDA approved by their own standards now. But we still do it because if you don't, you might, if you let's say someone is injured, and you didn't do the standard of care, which is backboarding, making it worse, well, you're open for getting sued, and you're open for losing your ability to practice medicine.
And the
reverse, sorry, go ahead.
And the reverse of that is the fact that we have issues within community paramedicine that's so nascent that the rules don't exist. So the idea of being able to actually have that continuity of care and know what's a standard is nebulous at best.
Right. Yeah. So there's no consistent thing there either, so you could be getting different levels. There's no standardized set of it. It's all brand new kind of medicine too. So we're looking to see who's doing it, how's it going, what's happening with it, because so much of it, I mean, even like some units, some I know it's really fun to watch. Some agencies are putting like mobile CT scanners or ultrasounds on some of them. There are some CT units for like neuro units that they've got in some cities, but other places are carrying whole blood. Other places
are comfortable giving TPA.
Right. Yeah. So there's so much that's really cool and they could be able to do. So what's tough with the standardizing stuff too is it's like we're so one place is going to work in another. Like you look at that's where the individual protocols come in. Like a urban area like Orange County protocol is much more limited compared to where you and I work in more rural areas like Lake County, because we have longer transport times. There's not a hospital in every other block. And there's, a lot more we have to be able to handle out there doing for a longer time. So meanwhile, like you don't need to set up a dopamine drip when you're a block away from the hospital.
No, yeah. But to continue with that, you also have your critical care guidelines. And for right now, critical care is another aspect of paramedicine where until there's a real state and national standards, I'm almost hesitant to get a critical care class done because it's only valued in a certain place in a certain agency at a certain time.
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't know the critical care it's not like a state accredited thing. It's just wherever you go. Well, but yeah, so I guess in that case, you would probably try to get it from somewhere like Shands or like the most prestigious places you can get it. That way it'd probably be accepted in most places. But even then, it's no guarantee, I'd imagine.
Shands or Maryland, because the University of Maryland had those first classes and they still put them on that 2-week course. But the idea is you might have that, but what value does it have outside of there, depending on your agency? No one's certain. There are no standards yet.
Interesting. Yeah. All right. So let's go back. So we've definitely discussed a lot of things that cause the difficulty, why it's so hard to have that work-life balance. But what are some different things that you've found? I mean, you mentioned physical activity, marathon running. And so what are some ways that you've been working to get that balance and maintain it while still working a very demanding, difficult job?
I think that it really, the best word, I like to call it family. It seems that you prefer community, and that's great, but it's finding that community outside of work, which is so important. You need to find something that you're passionate about that takes you out of the environment of your job. Because, and I don't want to genderize this in any way, but I think that as young men, sometimes we see ourselves as what we do, and that's only half of who we are. So the idea of being able to find that other community that completes you is a good idea.
Yeah, 100%. I was completely unraveling my identity from my job was the hardest thing. So whenever I had to leave the job, it was like I was suicidal. I was like, I have to step away. But when I stepped away, I felt like I was stepping away from like my entire identity, because the entire time, like I was always, I don't want this like all this blame to go to my parents, but like it's the culture and the environment that a lot of young men around me geographically and my place and time grew up in was you're a dude, go out and be useful. Your worth to society is based upon like tangible worth. Like, what do you provide? What can you do? And so I'm like, okay, well, I'm providing a necessary service. I know it's a great job. I've loved it, but it wasn't just, I mean, I'm sure there's a factor of it being it being a job that's not a lot of people can do. That is, got the adrenaline rush I liked. Being 20, I thought my fully formed frontal cortex, thinking adrenaline was everything, chasing it like crazy. And learning later on that it's something that was tied into my bipolar diagnosis as well, was those happy chemicals after that. Oh man, that feeling you get after you run a code and then you look in there and they're getting ready to extubate. Oh my God, like nothing touches that. Like when you come back from realizing you had a direct hand and whether someone else is still breathing or not, there's no better feeling than that. And it becomes addicting too. And that's another factor that gets us in the cycle of abuse where you put up with the bullshit calls, the low wages, we're chasing that high. And it's not just that. I mean, it's not just that too. It's like it's a substantial feeling of service to your community, to your family, to people, humanity as a whole.
Being a paramedic is such a rewarding job that every time I've thought about becoming an RN or doing something else, I've been back on the box in 6 months.
Yeah, dude, I never wanted to be a nurse. I only went to the ER to be a nurse because there's just nothing else. It's good money. and I can do a bunch of stuff with it. But I never wanted to be a nurse. I always wanted to be a paramedic. I didn't want to be a firefighter either. I just wanted to be a medic. That's all I wanted to be. And if it was better, I'd still be there. But
it's the idea of being called to go into somebody's house and help them where they are.
the amount of trust when you can just show up and a complete stranger hands you their baby, just doesn't know you, that never talked to you, never even seen you before. They just know that you showed up in that flashy box and you're someone that's going to probably save their life, or at least the best chance they've got. The amount, and then to be the intimacy of being there when a new life comes into this world, to be there to help ease the passing of one out of it. There's nothing like it. And so like all of that factors into why it's so hard to leave too. And it was, God, man, I'm doing an event standby now where I just hang out. Like I was working on some basketball games this past weekend, and I wasn't really in a great mood one of the days. I was just kind of just sitting, chilling, kind of bored. And then there's an injury happened, wasn't anything major. I was able to go out there, help them. Everything was fine. But then when I got back, my mood was so much better. Mm-hmm. And even though it was, nothing really came of it, but I helped someone and it made me feel better. They said thank you. And I'm like, I felt like I made a difference. And that made such a huge difference in my mood too. And it's just, there's such a high and low cycle when you're on shift. I mean, in your career in general, like you see the best in people and you see the absolute worst. And sometimes you'll see it in the same shift.
Yeah.
And
that's another one of those reasons why you need to find that balance. So you have a chance to decompress and you have a chance to sort through everything. And sometimes it's as simple as stepping away. Sometimes it's as simple as having, that 48-hour period where you're not thinking about work, or you're not compartmentalized, but you're dealing with everything that you've seen.
Right. Yeah. Cause that's something big too, is like we're good at compartmentalizing because we have to, you see something traumatic when you're on the scene. Okay. Well, I can't deal with that now. I have to continue wanting to provide care and do what I can, but then like what we're really bad at later on is unpacking and facing it. Mm-hmm. Normally what we'll do is we just keep packing. And the next thing you know, you're 12 beers deep in the weekend and you're looking at that stack of pills thinking that's a way easier way to kill myself than it would be that's this way or that way. We're taught we're taught what to do when someone needs saving, but we're not taught very well how to cope with when we can't save them.
Whenever I know I truly have a problem is when I'm unable to tell my wife. When I can't tell her about something I've seen, that's when I know I have a problem.
Yeah. So who do you go to for things like that? I mean, I always go to other people I've worked with, friends, and other paramedics and people that understand it too. Because that was a big thing that early on I realized it wasn't the healthiest way I was starting to start building that community or that family, but it was through. Usually we're drinking when we did it, but we still were building that camaraderie where it had a couple of different EMT medic friends that we'd hang out with periodically, and then but the alcohol was ultimately a detriment to it, but it also came in a place where we weren't very emotionally available. We weren't willing to just be like, hey man, this bothers me, without that social lubricant the alcohol provides. Because otherwise we're like, well, we don't want to be the first one to admit that fucked me out.
Well, I mean, I'm different in that, I'll shun large groups of people on a regular basis, but I have a great relationship with a lot of my old partners who, are now, fully functional paramedics in their own right. And I have a lot of just, friends I've made throughout the years. So for me, it's not a big deal to text somebody and be like, this is what, I'm not okay today. But beyond that, it's the idea of, they'll understand because they've been in those situations too, what I saw and why I'm not okay. Mm-hmm. But to me, like all that's how I might start to process something, but it's really not processed until I'm able to tell the people closest to me.
Right. I've noticed that for me too. I started journaling to help me process what was going on. So my mind's moving a mile a minute every other day and overthinking absolutely everything. And it's hard for me to. I like to very, very analytical kind of problem solving kind of mind. So if something's bothering me, I'm like, okay, well, there's a problem. Let's figure out what it is. For me to find out what's bothering me, it's usually for me to articulate it. I usually go to write. Writing is a good way for me to turn these emotions or these concepts into something more concrete that I can start working on and managing. So if I can down to, okay, well, I feel anxious because It's I'm in an environment that's got a lot of doors and windows. There's a big crowd. Okay, that's why I'm going anxious. Okay, well now I can. It helps me cope a little bit too if I can find out why I have this kind of off feeling.
Mhm. Yeah, it's definitely, having a, being able to figure out what's bothering you is important. And being able to have whatever coping mechanisms work for you. For me, in situations, I really don't even try and begin to process for the most part. I just kind of go through, I do the job that needs to be done. And then on the back half is when I try and I try and deal with it for the best.
Mhm.
And for me, as far as the physical activity, and this is just a fun example between cycling and running, I can solve all the world's problems on a bicycle. On a bicycle, I'm the engine. It's doing most of the work. I'm just pedaling, turning, descending, and having deep conversations with myself.
There's something to that. Yeah, I know a lot of people that get into they'll get into the point, and I guess to an extent, when I was doing a lot of running, I can relate to it a little bit. But you just one foot in front of the other, like just repetitive motion, you're just getting in the zone, and then your mind becomes so clear.
Mm-hmm. Now, with running, for me, it's much different. For me, running is a full body activity because I'm trying to protect my back a little bit. I'm watching my form. I'm moving my arms in a certain way. And when I'm running, it takes me away from whether it's family issues or whether it's work issues. It's just me being in tune with my body, and that resets everything else. To know that I can go ahead and that my mind controls my body, and that my spirit controls my mind, as far as I can go ahead and have some control over my emotions, it resets the whole picture so that I can come back and deal with everything else.
That's something that's something else that's really hard to be doing in a really active EMS career too, is finding time for physical activity.
Oh yeah, and that's why, I will tell everybody that the first person you have to take care of is yourself, and that physical activity, it's for your overall health, but it's definitely for your mental health too. You have to find some way to engage your activity to make yourself right before you get into work to try and help others.
Yeah, I think it's a good outlet too, because a lot of times we'll have this frustrated, pent up stress, and there's so often we can exert it either on our loved ones or in some other kind of negative way, or on ourselves with self-destructive behavior, or we can oftentimes get some physical exercise. And I'm not good at remembering that advice. I'm very, very bad at it, because when I don't want to do something, I'll find every excuse not to do it. And a lot of times that ends up being physical activity. But days like that, I'll be like, okay, I'm not going to run today. I'll walk.
Yeah.
Or I don't know, I'm really feeling really bad. I'll just walk down, walk around the block, just something at least, so I can say it's better than nothing. Because there's so often I'll have the bad depression days where it's just executive dysfunction crazy. I don't brush my teeth. I don't shower for days, and then when those things come up, I have to be like, okay, a little bit's better than nothing. Brush my teeth for 30 seconds, better than not doing it at all.
But how do you feel after you do those things? How do you feel after you put in that little bit of effort?
Substantially better, measurably better.
My whole thing is I've learned that. And so I know that's, I try and get my physical activity done as early as possible in the day, because I can be so much more useful for everybody else if I take that hour for me. I would rather wake up at 5:30 in the morning to know that by 7 o'clock, I'm good to go. I've done something for me. I'm squared away.
And also, it just clears my mind so much more if I've already gotten done what I feel obligated to do. Because otherwise, part of my mind's going to be thinking, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this. And as the day goes on, as I eat a couple of meals, as I get an insulin dump after, I'm not going to want to do it. I'm just less and less likely. And then if I don't do it, I feel like a POS.
Exactly. And there's a certain amount of dopamine hit that comes from that accomplishment of knowing that you've done it. You've
Right.
that, you've set yourself up for what you want. You set yourself up for success by completing what you wanted to do today. And there's nothing more, and there is something so inherently valuable about taking care of yourself so you can take care of others. It's not an issue of selfishness in any way, shape, or form. Like, I will tease myself and call myself vain and everything else with my accountability posts, but it is 100% makes me a better parent, it makes me a better provider, and it makes me a better person.
And there's definitely something there too, because I'm the kind of person that as I don't know. I think I have a weird social awkwardness. For as much as I like being in the spotlight, I get real uncomfortable when it's actually on me for too long. But it helps me a lot too. If I, that's a weird way to say it. I don't know if I'm explaining it well, but if I have a certain amount of positive peer pressure,
Mhm.
I'm going to end up better off. If I get positive reinforcement when I do something that's good for me, like if I post a picture of me after I've ran a 5K, even if it was a struggle session, walk the half of it, everyone's encouraging me, like, hey, like, you know, you feel tired, but you did it. And I'm getting that outside reinforcement too, because my mind after that 5K is going to be like, you weren't as fast as last time. You could have gone harder. You got winded too quickly there. Your pacing was all off when you hit that little tiny hill. That's what's in my mind. Like you did it, but so what? But everyone else is like, you did it. That's awesome. That's huge. Blah blah blah. And so it's part of that family that we're building. You know, whether it be family, community, where it's many things, but it's many names. The same thing by many names.
Exactly. And the bigger point is that you are more than just what you do. You are more than just a run. But all of this makes to a better you if you do it right.
Absolutely. And plus, like, there you get you get a dopamine hit from even the social media interactions like that. Like, we already know when you see likes on your statuses and things like that, you're getting a dopamine hit. You know, we know the pitfalls that can be in the cycle, but what about the positive side of it too? What if you're like, hey, what if you get that dopamine hit from positive reinforcements? You know, there's the same caveman mechanisms that cause us to have reactions to things that can be negative can absolutely be utilized in a way for positive reinforcement and to kick back in those positive feedback mechanisms.
It's nothing but a tool. And as silly as it is, it's nothing but a hammer. Hammers can be good, can be used for good or ill. It's up to you how you want to use that hammer.
Right. You like recognize you have the tool in your toolkit, but don't forget it's not your only tool.
Yeah.
Like, so like, it's like when you have a hammer, it looks like a nail. It's like you got a screwdriver, you got a tape measure, so you've got some social media interaction, you got your community, but then you've also got your exercise, you've got your literal in-person families, whatever close support networks you have. There's, you need a whole, it's the cheesiest thing I've ever said today so far. You need a whole Batman's toolkit of coping mechanisms and different things that are going to help you establish a healthy balance.
Indeed, you need to. It's not only fostering those communities and having something to look forward to, which is a big deal. And I honestly suggest, whether you're working in EMS and you're not sure whether you should go to school or not, you should always be pursuing those prerequisites in such a way so that you feel like you're making progress in your career, because that is not all of you, but it is a part of what you do and a part of who you are. Just the same way where if running is how you find enjoyment, go up and sign up for that race so you have it on the calendar, so it's something for you to look forward to. Because the training is the hard part. The race itself is a celebration. So it's the idea of making sure that you're communicating with yourself to give yourself all those positive reinforcements along the way to make those rough days and to make mandatory more acceptable, because that you are working toward, that your progress, that you're working towards something, and those minor setbacks are expected on your way to progress, because progress is not linear.
I think a good way of gauging whether or not where you're working and where your job's really starting to become more of a toxic situation than a beneficial one is when you start noticing if you do have those balancings, that balance set, and you notice that it's tipping more towards the work side and you're living less and less time for your stuff. I think that'd be a good gauge, starting to realize, okay, well, now maybe the job's becoming a problem.
Mm-hmm. I work a 12-hour truck, and I specifically took a 10 to 10. And I took a 10 to 10 so I didn't have to wake up too early and I could still take care of myself and see my kids in the morning.
And that's something I think more shifts. I think more shifts for less hours is going to be the more immediate answer to some staffing retention. More money, more shifts, less hours, less burnout, hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
But are there any resources that you've used recently to help you with some of this, or anything that you would want to give to people that are coming up in the field or thinking about the idea of going through fire and EMS? Because as much crap as I talk about, it's the best job in the world. And it's unfortunate that the best job in the world doesn't have a better support structure for it. But I don't want to dissuade people from getting into it. Maybe now, maybe not immediately, but like, we're trying to build a better future for y'all, if you can build a better future for your communities as well. So what would you pass on to someone playing with the idea of jumping into EMT school now?
Well, the first thing I will always say is that getting into EMS is one of the few professions I can think of where you go ahead and you spend a semester in school, and then all of a sudden you at least have a job that will pay your bills. That is that although that's a more, practical need, but if you are called to do this and it's something that you find interesting, you might as well give it a try, because in 3 months you have a skill.
Yeah.
You are now not unskilled labor. Congratulations, you are skilled labor.
Kind of skilled labor, but yeah, you're skilled labor. Yeah, the joking aside for EMTs, I would take a good EMT partner over a bad medic any day of the week. And every good medic I know say the exact same thing. I've had they say medics save lives, EMTs save medics.
That's true. That's true. And and I've been that EMT, and I've also had those EMTs, so that's a good thing.
Likewise, it's been a good experience.
But as far as that goes, first of all, it's the issue of, if this is something you're called to do, go ahead and try it, because you're not going to lose too much by trying it. The other thing is to make time for yourself and to do it early in your career. It's okay to go to sleep. It's okay to hit it in the morning. It's okay to know your limits. And that goes for EMS or anything else. It's okay to not answer that page when they're looking for someone to pick up shifts. It's perfectly okay to say, nope, I'm going home.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you do that now, you'll reduce the risk of being salty later by a lot.
Oh yeah, because trust me, the desalination process is hard. I'm trying to desaltify myself. It's tough. It's like the undercarriage of a car in Alaska. But yeah, and it's okay to tell people, or the people you're working with, that, hey, what I saw on that last call bothered me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
absolutely. That's fantastic advice, man. Maybe you should be into teaching. I do know a lot of people that leave EMS start teaching. I think, well, that's the kind of experience that they sorely need.
Well, as I said, my real goals at this point, as I transition out of the box eventually, will be to have the certificates behind my name, getting a bachelor's in EMS, in EMS. So once I have that, then I have a better chance of finding a job where I actually have a seat at the table. And if I can combine that with a master's of social work, I'll get to look at people like county managers and fire chiefs directly in the face and say, okay, but how does this really affect the crews?
Right. And you'll have some gumption behind your statement, because you back it up with the standard of, I have at least this education, all of this, but the experience there, I think, like we've been saying, is going to be a very, very valuable part too. So you're combining that experience and the book learnings. So yeah. I'm excited, man. I really hope that, well, I mean, there's only two options really. Either we start making some of the steps and the changes that you're talking about becoming part of implementing, or the entire system's going to go belly up. And that's, with society can't function without that safety net.
Exactly. We can't let that happen. And so we have to be part of that change. We have to be willing to confront issues within departments that, we have people that only want to work a 24-hour shift. And sometimes you have to sit them down and say, that's not sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
I know somebody right now, because of finances, it has to work 84 hours a week.
Man, but we've been there. A lot of people have been there. It's absolutely terrifying.
It's not sustainable. So somebody has to step in there and help out, because that was another point, and that's another point for the social systems here, and why having that network is so important. How can you begin to solve your financial problems? How can you begin to come up with a plan if you're at work 84 hours a week?
Right. You're not changing anything. You're just keep working more and more, and it's just not. And then you're burning yourself out too at the same time, which is the worst part of the entire thing.
And that kind of financial literacy should be part of our organizational structure.
I think you should have someone that you can go to for mental health in your department. You should have someone you can go to for financial advice in your department or your agency, or if you're for the county. There should be people available to help you succeed. Because if you have successful employees and they're going well in their lives, they're not going to feel like they need to go anywhere else. So you're going to maintain that. They're going to get better. They're going to make your organization better.
Exactly. And if you're going to if you're dealing with, we're going to pull somebody away for a 36-hour shift or a 48-hour shift, they need to have those resources available because they're not going to have the time or ability to do it for themselves.
Exactly. If we're taking care of others, someone's got to take care of us.
Yep.
It sounds like you're going to be one of those people taking care of the ones taking care of everybody too. Take care of everybody. Dude, thank you so much for coming on and talking with me today. Is there anything we didn't touch on you want to talk about before we go?
This is just one thing. The Great Cycling Challenge, it happens every year. It used to be in July, now it's in September. But it's I ride miles for pediatric cancer research. And long story short, if you're interested in getting involved in an organization, a charity, or if you're looking for something to donate time to, or energy to, or even money to, having a charity that you support is so rewarding. And so mine's the Great Cycling Challenge, and I hope y'all find one too.
That's a really good idea. Yeah, I'll put the link for that in the description for this episode.
All right, thank you much.
All right, thank you so much, man. I'm really glad that we had a chance to meet and work together all those years, and hopefully we can still work together now in a different way on something that's just as important, if not even bigger in scope than we thought we'd be involved with back then. So thank you, man. I will be in touch soon, and good luck with everything. Thank you again.
All right, thank you much, sir. Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye.